When a man starts playing with your emotions, you have to understand one thing first. He's not confused, baby, he's comfortable. See, confusion means he doesn't know what he wants. Comfort means he knows exactly what he's doing and he's enjoying the benefits while you sit there trying to figure him out. And that's where most women lose the game, trying to decode a man who's already shown his code. You don't outsmart a man by chasing answers. You outsmart him by changing your position. You stop asking why he did that, and you start asking yourself, why am I allowing it? Because the minute you switch that question, the power shifts. He stops being the player, and you start being the coach. If a man knows he's got access to your emotions anytime he wants, he'll use them. He'll text you just enough to keep you hoping, call you just enough to keep you waiting, show up just enough to keep you believing. And every time he feels you slipping away, here he comes again with that same old charm, that same sweet talk, acting like he's finally figured it out. Baby, that's not love, that's strategy. You gotta learn to recognize the difference between consistency and convenience. Consistency means he shows up because he values you. Convenience means he shows up because you're available. When a man only shows up when he feels like it, that's not affection, that's manipulation. And once you see that, you stop reacting. You stop arguing. You stop explaining yourself to someone who already knows what he's doing. The moment you stop giving emotional reactions, you become unpredictable. And nothing scares a manipulator more than a woman who's no longer predictable. Stop picking up every call. Stop replying right away. Stop showing him that he still controls your mood. Instead, move in silence. Start focusing on your peace. When he notices that his words don't move you, his actions don't shake you, and his games don't confuse you anymore, that's when the game ends. Outsmarting a man like that isn't about revenge. It's about self-control. It's about letting him sit in the silence he created. Because when you finally stop entertaining the nonsense, he's left alone with the noise of his own emptiness. And let me tell you something. That silence is louder than any argument you could ever have. You don't have to announce your boundaries. Leave them. Don't say, I'm done. Show that you're done. Don't tell him you've moved on. Let your peace prove it. Because when a woman finds her worth, the game's over before it even starts. When a man starts playing with your emotions, you have to understand something deep about human nature. Most people, when they act in ways that confuse you, are not actually confused themselves. They're comfortable. See, confusion means someone doesn't know what they want, but comfort means they know exactly what they're getting away with. And when a man is comfortable in how he treats you, it's usually because he's learned that he can. He's learned that you'll keep giving him another chance, another explanation, another moment of your heart, even when he hasn't earned it. That's not confusion, that's privilege. He's comfortable in the pattern because he doesn't face any consequence for it. And the more you excuse it as mixed signals or emotional immaturity, the more you let him stay cozy in his own chaos. See, women often waste their energy decoding every little action, every delayed text, every half-hearted call, every sweet moment that disappears the next day. But when you start decoding someone who's already showing you the truth through their actions, you're really just writing excuses to protect your own hope. You want to believe there's something deeper, something you're missing, something that could explain why he's hot and cold. But when a person's pattern is inconsistent, that inconsistency is the message. You don't need to be a detective in someone's emotional game. You just need to be honest with yourself about what you're seeing. Men who play with emotions do it because it works. When a man knows you'll stick around even when he's inconsistent, he learns that your forgiveness is his safety net. He doesn't have to put in effort. He doesn't have to give clarity. He doesn't have to make a decision. Because you're already giving him everything he'd get from commitment without him having to commit. That's why he's comfortable. That's why he stays. Because he's getting access to your energy, your time, your care, your attention, without ever having to give you the stability you deserve. He's not lost. He's not figuring himself out. He's simply content living in a situation that benefits him. And that's why the first step in outsmarting him is to recognize that what you're dealing with is not confusion. Once you stop giving him the excuse of confusion, you stop giving him control. Because now you see the pattern clearly for what it is. Manipulation wrapped in charm, laziness disguised as, I'm just not ready. Inconsistency presented as mystery. You stop feeding the game by calling it love, and you start seeing it as imbalance. You stop interpreting silence as deep thought, and you start reading it as indifference. The more honest you are with yourself, the less room there is for emotional fog. You begin to see that the comfort he feels comes from the effort you keep giving, not from any genuine confusion on his part. And when that realization finally lands, it changes everything about how you respond, how you protect your peace, and how you choose yourself over his comfort. When you keep asking yourself why he acts the way he does, you're giving all your energy to someone else's choices instead of your own boundaries. The real shift happens when you stop asking, why is he doing this? And start asking, why am I allowing this? Because that's the question that puts you back in control. When you focus on his behavior, you stay trapped in confusion. You're constantly reacting, analyzing, trying to fix something that you didn't break. But when you focus on your own response, you move from victim to authority. You stop trying to control someone else's actions and start mastering your own standards. That's where your power lies, not in changing him, but in changing what you tolerate. When a man realizes he can do the bare minimum and still keep a place in your life, he will. That's human nature. People repeat what works for them. If you let him keep coming back after disappearing, if you keep answering calls after disrespect, if you keep explaining yourself to someone who never listens, then you've already taught him that his actions have no consequences. And the moment he feels that comfort, he stops trying. You become the one doing all the emotional labor while he just coasts along, knowing you'll clean up the mess every time. That's why you have to switch the game. You have to stop rewarding the behavior that drains you and start protecting the peace that feeds you. The truth is, most people don't change because they suddenly see the light. They change because they feel the heat. As long as you keep cushioning the fall, he'll never learn. But when you pull back, when you stop reacting, when you make silence your new response, he starts realizing the game isn't fun anymore. You don't have to yell. You don't have to beg. You don't have to make grand speeches. You just stop being accessible to the same chaos that once kept you up at night. Because once you shift the focus from, why is he doing this to me, to, why am I still letting him? The dynamic flips. He no longer holds the strings, you do. It's not about punishment or revenge. It's about clarity. You're no longer the one waiting for him to value you. You're the one deciding who gets access to your energy. When you ask yourself why you're allowing it, you start seeing the parts of you that keep choosing hope over reality. You start realizing that maybe it's not about him at all. It's about your fear of letting go, your attachment to potential, your belief that love requires patience even when it hurts. But love without respect is just pain in disguise. So you learn to redirect your attention inward. You start healing the part of you that accepts confusion as connection. You start building a version of yourself that doesn't need validation from someone who can't even offer consistency. And in that moment, you reclaim your power, not because he gave it back, but because you finally remembered it was yours all along. There's a huge difference between consistency and convenience, but a lot of people get fooled because both can look the same in the beginning. Consistency feels steady, reliable, and intentional. It's when someone shows up because they genuinely care, because they value your time, because they respect your heart. Convenience, on the other hand, is when someone shows up only when it benefits them. It's when they reach out not out of love, but out of habit. Not because they miss you, but because they know you'll answer. The gestures might look similar, but the motive is what separates sincerity from strategy. When a man is consistent, his actions align with his words. When he's acting out of convenience, his effort fluctuates with his needs. The tricky part is that convenience can disguise itself as affection. He'll call just when you've started to pull away. He'll text just when you've stopped checking your phone for him. He'll show up just when you've started to feel peace again. And in those moments, it's easy to mistake timing for effort. You think he's finally realizing your worth, but what's really happening is he's sensing his control slipping. Convenience will always make a person return just long enough to keep the door open, but never long enough to walk through it. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse crumbs of attention for a full meal of commitment. Consistency doesn't need constant reassurance. It doesn't vanish after an argument or disappear when things get uncomfortable. When someone is consistent, their energy stays the same regardless of how easy or hard things get. They don't only show up when they want something. They show up because they care about how you feel. They don't keep you guessing because they respect your peace more than their ego. But someone who's just around for convenience. They thrive on uncertainty. They keep you questioning. They keep you waiting. They keep you hanging on to what might happen. That's not love. That's management. They're managing your emotions to keep themselves in control. When you start to understand that difference, your reactions begin to change. You stop getting excited about small bursts of attention and you start looking at patterns instead. You stop romanticizing inconsistency as complexity. You stop explaining his distance as he's just busy. You start reading the signs for what they are. If his presence depends on his mood, if his affection depends on his convenience, if his communication depends on your silence, then he's not being consistent, he's being calculated. The moment you see that clearly, you stop playing the game. You stop adjusting your expectations to match his effort. You start realizing that real consistency doesn't need convincing, and real love doesn't make you chase it. Because someone who truly values you won't only show up when it's easy, they'll stay when it's hard, they'll communicate when it's messy, and they'll be present not because it's convenient, but because you matter. When you take back control by removing your emotional reactions, everything changes. The reason manipulation works is because it feeds on reaction. Every time you cry, argue, explain, or try to prove your point, you're giving the other person confirmation that they still hold emotional power over you. They don't need to win the argument. They just need to know they can move you. Emotional control is their currency, and your reaction is the payment. When you stop reacting, you stop paying. You start realizing that silence can be louder than any word, and distance can be stronger than any confrontation. When a man knows he can pull a reaction out of you anytime he wants, he'll use it to reset his control. He'll say something just to get you talking again, do something careless to make you emotional, or go silent to make you chase him. Every move is about getting you back to that familiar place where he feels powerful and you feel uncertain. But once you stop reacting, he's left with confusion. He can't find the buttons to press anymore. The same tricks don't work. The same words don't hit. And when he can't predict your response, he starts losing interest in the game because the game depends on your participation. Removing emotional reaction doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop performing your feelings for someone who doesn't value them. You still process, you still care, you still have emotions, but you handle them privately instead of making them public property for manipulation. You journal instead of texting him. You vent to a friend instead of replying to him. You cry in your own space instead of letting him see your pain and use it as leverage. That's how emotional maturity wins over emotional chaos. You start mastering the pause instead of mastering the argument. You choose peace over proving your point, silence over circular conversations, calmness over chaos. There's a kind of power that comes with stillness. When you stop reacting, you start observing. You begin to see his behavior without the blur of emotion. You notice patterns you missed before because you were too busy explaining yourself. You start to realize how predictable his timing is, how rehearsed his excuses sound, how empty his apologies feel. The more you see clearly, the less interest you have in engaging. That's how detachment grows. Not from coldness, but from clarity. And the more detached you become, the more his power fades. When your emotions are no longer at his disposal, you shift the balance completely. You teach yourself that not every action deserves a reaction. Not every message deserves a response. Not every apology deserves a second chance. You learn to protect your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. The less you give him access to your emotions, the more you give yourself access to your strength. That's how you move from being controlled by the game to being completely free from it. Moving in silence is one of the most powerful things you can ever do when someone has been playing with your emotions. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming intentional. When you move in silence, you stop broadcasting your plans, your feelings, your progress, and your pain. You stop giving people front row seats to your healing. The ones who once thrived on your reactions start wondering what's going on, and that's the beauty of it. They can't study your silence. They can't twist it, argue with it, or use it against you. Silence is unpredictable, and unpredictability makes manipulators uncomfortable. When you choose to move quietly, You start reclaiming your peace piece by piece. You're no longer explaining why you're distant, why you're unavailable, or why you're no longer the same person who used to pick up every call. You don't owe anyone that explanation, especially not someone who ignored your effort when you were loud about your love. There's a power that comes from being unbothered and focused. The energy you once wasted trying to convince someone to value you now becomes fuel for building yourself. You start pouring that energy into your goals, your healing, your peace. And when your focus shifts inward, everything around you starts to shift too. The silence teaches discipline. You learn to resist the urge to prove that you've moved on. You stop posting messages meant to be seen by them. You stop replying just to show you're unaffected. You stop trying to prove you've healed faster than you really have. Instead, you heal for real, in private. You make decisions that align with peace, not performance. Because peace isn't loud, it's steady. It's in the way you stop checking for updates, stop waiting for closure, stop needing validation. You begin to understand that growth doesn't need an audience. You don't need to show them what they lost. They'll feel it in your absence. When you move in silence, you're not running away from confrontation. You're simply choosing not to feed it. You start valuing calm over chaos. You realize that not every situation needs your reaction, and not every person deserves your explanation. The best revenge isn't in proving them wrong, it's in living right. It's in protecting your energy so completely that the same person who once controlled your emotions can no longer access them. The more you stay quiet, the louder your peace becomes. It speaks through your progress, through your confidence, through the glow that comes from finally being free from the emotional roller coaster. People who play games rely on your noise to measure their power. Every message, every argument, every tear is a sign that they still hold space in your world. But when you move in silence, they're left guessing. They can't figure out what you're thinking, who you're talking to, what you're planning next. That's how you win without saying a word. Your silence becomes your strength, your growth becomes your statement, and your peace becomes the proof that you've outsmarted the entire game. When you stop announcing your boundaries and start living them, people begin to take you seriously without you having to say a word. Too often, people talk about what they'll never tolerate again, but then they keep tolerating it. They declare I'm done, but keep answering the same late-night calls. They post about self-respect, but still entertain the same disrespect. The truth is, your boundaries don't need a speech, they need consistency. When you live your standards quietly and firmly, you create an unspoken rule that teaches people how to treat you. The moment your actions align with your words, your energy shifts. You stop begging people to respect you because your silence and distance do all the talking. Living your boundaries means no longer negotiating them every time someone tests you. It means understanding that you don't need to explain why something offends you, drains you, or disrespects you. You don't have to make someone comfortable with the limits you set. The people who genuinely care will adjust, and the ones who don't were only comfortable because you had no limits before. You start realizing that enforcing a boundary isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's not about punishing anyone, it's about protecting yourself. The moment you stop explaining and start acting, you stop being an option and start being the standard. Boundaries are not about building walls, they're about building gates. They allow love in, but they keep chaos out. And when you live those boundaries consistently, you start to notice how peace feels like power. You no longer chase people to understand your worth because your absence says everything your words use to try to explain. You stop arguing with people who already know what they're doing. You stop forgiving behavior that keeps repeating, and you stop compromising your peace just to keep some